Thank you, Alan. Let me give you a little background on why that's the title of the talk. My great-grandfather started our family business in 1896, and I'm the fourth generation in the family business. And up until the 70s, it was basically a regulated monopoly. And as all of you know, the Bell system was broken up in the 70s, and quite frankly, we lost our biggest customer, who was 25% of our revenue, but 100% of our earnings. And so there was only one thing to do, and that was to try to sell our way out of the problem. So I approached my grandfather about backing us to do this, and he was good enough to let Bill Scott and I start building businesses. But shortly after he agreed to fund us, a really good friend came to us and tried to talk us out of it. And he had been really, I think, instructed by our competitor to try to talk us out of starting this business. And he knew I had such a love for dogs. I've always had bird dogs. And so he used this analogy. He said, Bubba, let me tell you something. It's really easy to make $1 million raising dogs on paper, but it's really hard to do that in the real world, okay? And so today, what I share with you is we've probably been fortunate enough to either back or look at hundreds of business plans, hundreds of financial models. And an old friend and board member of ours here, Bill Parr, used to say this. Whenever we would make a presentation, he said, Bubba, it's going to take twice as long and twice as much money as you think to build this business. And what I would share with you today, and even though I know these rules, okay, I know them. I have done my own business plans. In all of the businesses that we've been involved in, there's only been 2 businesses that actually were started and delivered on time and on budget what they said they were going to do. So I would also share with you that there's never been a better time. If any of you are thinking about starting your own business, these are all little tidbits that you can take away, and maybe in these little snippets you'll think about them as you build your business. But there's never been a better time in my lifetime to start a business. Cloud computing is accepted now. Enterprises will buy from startups. You can start a business, on $5 or $6 million. That's what it used to take just to build the data center that you were going to put your stuff in and buy the equipment. So there's never been a better time. The next little thing I will share with you is that we're in a unique situation in that there's never been 4 generations in the workplace before. But the one thing that's consistent across all 4 of those generations is they want to know what you stand for. So my advice to you is to create a value system for your business. Lay out the goals you want, but be able to articulate what you really stand for so that when you recruit people to work with you or you're out selling customers, everybody's consistently knowing what you're doing. And we believe this so strongly that we've got it in a tombstone at the front door of the building. And this is what we stand for. And we put it there so if there are customers coming in, they can hold us accountable to it. If there are employees that are looking for an opportunity to work with us, they know what we stand for. And as we walk by it every morning when we go to work, we know we've got to live up to that value system if we're going to build the kinds of businesses that we want to build. The second piece of advice I'd give you around that value system is find you a partner if you're going to start a business. It is lonesome doing it by yourself. And I put this little phrase on there, you can talk yourself into doing anything, and we all know that. We've all done that. And I go back and reflect on my business career where I've had a partner that would challenge the thinking. Now, we would shut the door and have a heated conversation, but when we opened that door, we locked arm in arm and went forward. We made the most money when I had that partner, and I lost the most money when I didn't. So I highly recommend that you consider that. This is something I teach my grandboys. We were up in the mountains about a week ago, and I told them, I said, boys, when Dada's gone, what is the one thing y'all going to remember Dada said? He said, we will become who we hang out with. So you pick your friends very carefully. And I say the same thing in a business environment. You need to recruit people that you believe have the same values you have, and you will build a substantial and significant business. I really believe in having a board. You need some trusted advisors. You need to have them around you where they can counsel you. And by the way, there's a lot of great people that'll do this for nothing. But if you give them a little stock in your company or options in your company, you can actually have them really interested in helping you be successful. And it'll keep you from just making some really dumb mistakes. We have another saying is, and this is the real criteria of meeting with the CEOs that we're going to invest with and the central management team, is that we always bet on the jockeys and we don't bet on the horses, okay? And I will tell you, we've got a policy that before we invest in a company, we take the spouse of the CEO and the executives out to dinner. And because what we've learned over the last 40 years is you're going to spend as much time with the people at work as you do at home, quite frankly. And if you go do that, you'll get to watch and see how that person treats their spouse, which is going to be exactly how they're going to treat the associates they work with after they get comfortable with them. This next point, I have to give you a little story to explain what it means, the need to love and the need to be loved. And all the folks that work with me know I use this term all the time in different situations. But when I was a young guy, about 25 years old, we had about 130 operators that worked at the phone company that switched all the calls. And I started hearing rumblings of union rumbles, and we'd never had a union. And there was a lawyer over in Birmingham, Dick Walton, who would take you as a client if you didn't have a union. And so I took our lawyer and we go over to Birmingham and I sit down with Dick Walton, and Dick asked us a lot of questions. And then he said to me, he said, Cam, I want you to understand there's only two things that make the world go round, the need to love and the need to be loved. Well, he says, you go away and you think about what we've talked about and you come back in a couple of weeks. But what I want you to do is to go home and have a meeting with the operators. And I don't want you to debate anything. I don't want you to debate with them. I want you to write down everything that they think could be better at work. Put it on a piece of paper. So I did exactly what he said, although I will tell you, when I got to the street with the lawyer, I said, we paid that guy to tell us that, this. And so he said, yeah. And so we actually came home and did what he said, okay? Unbeknown to me, my dad decided that he was going to redecorate the operating room. Now, I know this is going to be hard for you to believe, but the operating room was 4 walls that were concrete block, okay? It was in the center of the phone company, and it was really stark. And my dad decided, this will date how long ago it was, he decided we were going to put these cork squares on the walls, and that he was going to build a curtain across one wall, and that curtain would actually simulate that there was a window behind it, even though the curtain was closed, and it would make the room feel better. Well, lo and behold, that's what he did. I didn't have any idea he was going to do that. And then about 2 weeks later, I did what Dick Walton told me to do. I got the operators back together again, and we started down the list. And I'll never forget the first thing that was on the first list and how the second conversation went. The first time we met, the first thing that came up was one operator said, I'd like for us to be able to drink Coca-Colas at the switchboard. And remember, Dick told me don't object, so I wrote it down, didn't say a word. I'm thinking to myself, you got to be kidding. But I didn't say that. So 2 weeks later, we go back and we start down that list, and I said the first thing on the list is we ought to be able to drink Coca-Colas at the switchboard. And one operator, before I could say anything, she said, that's the craziest idea I've ever heard of. She said, if somebody spills a Coke in the switchboard, we'll all be out of a job, and I got to put my kids through school. She said, I absolutely don't think that's a good idea, and I vote no. And all the other operators said, well, we vote no too. Well, guess what happened? Every one of those issues got solved without me opening my mouth, okay? And it dawned on me. My dad had gone in to decorate the operating room, and the operators were saying, Cam Jr. cares about us, okay? And all the things that were problems 2 weeks before vanished. They weren't problems anymore. So this is a very, very powerful concept, the need to love and the need to be loved. And it's got to be genuine. It can't be made up. It can't be, people see through all that. So it's got to really be genuine. I'll tell you one more story real quickly around that same concept. We backed about 6 years ago an outstanding executive from Greece. And on Sunday afternoon one day, we shook hands on the deal and we invested. And we'd never invested in a company from Greece before, actually hardly outside the Southeast. And on the way home, my partner was with me and he said, on the way home, the entrepreneur asked, he said, look, how long do you think it'll take to close? I said, well, it'll probably take 120 days, 130 days. And I saw the blood kind of drain out of his face and I didn't understand why. And I waited a few minutes to ask him. I said, Left Harris, why did you ask me that question? He said, well, I have a 7-year-old son at home and I was hoping to get home for Christmas. This was about the middle of November. Well, when we let him out of the car at the airport, I called the lawyers and said, look, we need to close this deal before Christmas where this guy can get home. And of course, the lawyer's response was, well, that's impossible. We can't possibly close this deal that quick. I said, yes, you can. They said, how do you even know he has a son? I said, look, nobody would make that up. You guys get this deal closed. Well, guess what? We did. And he got home for Christmas. And from that relationship, we created a real bond with each other personally. And if you think about it, here we are now building a company. We've got probably 6 companies that have employees in Greece, and probably 60 or 70 employees in Greece that are coding and working every day for our companies. But it was really because we had a bond that I trust you and you trust me. And so if you think about it, had you and I been in Greece, we would have loved to get home for our kids. So I just can't tell you how important this is, and make sure it's genuine. Free cash flow is all that matters. I can't overemphasize this. If you're losing money, and by the way, we have businesses that are losing money. If you're losing money, you're on somebody else's time and on their agenda. And the one thing I say about this is don't confuse that your bank and your credit cards are equity. Those guys expect to be paid back. That's not equity. Loans from your family is not equity. They expect to be paid back. So free cash flow is all that matters, and you need to have a plan that gives you cushion to get to free cash flow, because why? It's going to take twice as long and twice as much money as you think when you start. Okay? Oops. The next one is you can't out-crook a crook, especially if you aren't one, okay? And so I tell you this because if you're not a crook, you don't think like a crook, okay? And when you find yourself in business with a crook, you need to get out as quick as you possibly can. I have a great story here where we got in business with a guy, and he was a card-carrying crook. And we realized it, and we got out, and we lost about $250,000. No more than a year later, this big, huge opportunity surfaced. A bunch of our friends got in business with him. We didn't. We actually started a competing business to what he was doing. And lo and behold, he took all their money and bankrupted the company, and we ended up building a substantial public company simply because we didn't allow ourselves to get back in business with a crook. Let's see here. The next one is big boys and little boys can't play together. And I use this analogy. You think about it in grammar school. We had kids playing on the playground, but they all kind of migrate to a different place. The little boys get in one place, the medium-sized kids get in another, and the large boys get in another. And the reason is because they can't play together because somebody's going to get hurt. And what I share with you is that the same thing is true in business. When you've got a startup business, it is really tempting when some big successful brand comes along and says, hey, I'd like to partner with you. My suggestion to you is don't do it. Now, you say, well, why do you say that, Kim? Well, look, I've tried it twice, and it didn't work either time. And so I've learned that lesson, and you don't need to learn it. It's just really hard. But you're flattered because you think this big brand is going to want to work with you. The truth of it is they're on a different agenda than you are. They have different budget cycles. They have different timing. The people turn over, and here you are trying to get to positive cash flow as fast as you can. The rule of 78. I love recurring revenue businesses, and this is an important concept for you to learn and understand. The rule of 78. So let me give you the perfect example. If I sold one item each month for a year for $100, what would my revenue, assuming I had no churn, what would my revenue be that year? $7,800. And the reason is there's 7,800 billing months in a year. So if you build a customer, I sell one in January, I bill him for 12 months. I sell one in February, I bill him for 11 months. I sell one in March, I bill him for 10 months. You see what I'm saying? You add that up, and it's 78 billing months. So as you review business plans or you write your own, just do the quick test. How many have I got to sell a month? What's the price? How many billing months do I have? And you can pretty much figure out what your revenue is going to need to be. A corollary to big boys and little boys is you can't do 50-50 deals. I've never seen that be successful. Somebody's got to be in charge, and I've got a great story around this. We were doing a 50-50 deal in South Carolina and negotiated a 50-50 deal, although we don't do them. So right at the closing table, I said to the founder on the other side, I said, look, we can't do a 50-50 deal. And he said, I knew this was too good to be true. I knew something was going to happen. I said, no, hold on a minute. I said, we want to take our 1% and give it to the guy that's going to run the business. So you're going to own 50, we're going to own 49, and he's going to own 1. And about 2 weeks went by, and this guy, his name was Bill Giger, he called me up and he said, Lanier, I didn't understand what you were doing. He said, now the guy doesn't call me at all. He calls you every night. He said, you gave him the 1 point. I said, look, Bill, somebody had to be in charge, and so he's in charge. Not you and me, he's in charge. So I highly recommend don't do 50-50 deals. The next thing I would tell you right quickly is the first 50 million is the hardest revenue you'll ever generate. If you get the company to 50 million, you can't stop it from going to 100. But that first 50 million, a lot of things are going to change. Employees are going to change. Issues are going to change. Customers are going to change. Customer service is going to change. A whole lot of things are going to happen while that's going on. I think we got time. Well, let me say this. The people ask a lot of times, what is it, Cam, that you'd recommend we watch or listen to? I'm a big believer in the SaaStr podcast. I listen to them almost every morning. They're about 18 to 20 minutes. And I listen to a lot of them multiple times. I've got them bookmarked. And then there are 2 books that I think you really ought to read if you're going to build a business or if you're going to be in business. And one of them is The Richest Man That Ever Lived. This is a book about business. We actually give this to all of the managers of our businesses when we start them or we invest in them. We challenge them to read this and help us build a business around the core values that are espoused in this book, and they're really based on the book of Proverbs. I highly recommend it. The other thing that I wish I had known earlier in my business career or had been exposed to is a book called The Sociopath Next Door. This is a little bit frightening. 1 out of 25 people in this country is actually a sociopath. Now, that doesn't mean they're a killer. What that means is they have no conscience. It means that they will take advantage of you. They will throw you under the bus. They don't care about you. They're normally attractive. They're normally articulate. They don't have long-term relationships. If you marry one, you probably won't stay married very long because they just don't bond. And so until I understood reading this book, I had places along my business career where I didn't understand certain people. And after I read this book, I could almost go back and go, he was one, she was one, he was one, he was one. And so I highly recommend that you read that book. Thank you all for letting us be here today.